In this video, we strive to remain spoiler-free, discussing only story and plot elements from the books relevant to what has occurred already on the show. When necessary, a spoiler warning with a countdown will be given.
I'm Max.
And I'm the Geeky Hippie. Welcome back to WoT the Adaptation, the YouTube show that reviews adaptations from one form to another. This week we continue on with the Advance, but let me introduce our guest, Shawn. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. How's you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for coming on. You want to tell us about yourself?
No problem. Yeah, so I'm a huge science fiction and fantasy nerd, so I love science fiction and fantasy novels, series, and things like that. So I actually discovered The Expanse when I was in college. It was like shortly after the first book came out, and I read it, and then it was a few years later when I saw the trailer for the first book that I was like, okay, they turned this into a series. And so I was hooked from that. And then I watched the series pretty much as it was airing through until early last year when the last season 6 aired, and we had the last episode there. So I love The Expanse. It's probably one of my favorite series that's out there right now. So glad to be here talking about it.
Thanks for coming. Always glad to find new people to come on. I actually read it for the first time starting last year for this show, and then continued on later in the year, and then beginning of this year I binged the rest of the books. And I really happy that I finished it finally. I'd love to see the show go all the way to the end, if they could ever get off this pause that they're taking. So because I think the best stuff is in the latter end of the series, which is kind of surprising.
The last 3 books are really a great ride, but I'm honestly satisfied with the 6 seasons we got. As someone that's watched it as it was airing, having to deal with it being canceled by Sci-Fi and then picked up, and then 3 more seasons by Prime. I'm satisfied with what we got, because it could have just been 3 seasons, and that could have been the end. But the Expanse fan community really came together after season 3 and really helped to get Prime to pick it up. So I'm really glad that we got those 3 final seasons with Prime.
Yeah,
so
I am too.
If they get more Expanse, I'll take that too.
I can just dream that somebody else will pick it up in 15 years, maybe, when they've all aged up a little.
Oh yeah, definitely. The good thing is too, we're still getting some more Expanse too, with the Dragon Tooth comics, and then with the Telltale game here possibly this summer. So there's still some new Expanse coming.
That'll be fun. Max, you want to tell us about this week's episode?
Episode 8, Pyre, and it was directed by Kenneth Fink and Mark Fergus, and it's pretty much about the ramifications of what Anderson Daw did. And we get introduced to a new plot line regarding, is his name Ming?
Prax. Dr. Ming. His last name is Ming. Praxideki, I think is how they say it. I tried seeing if that was a real name anywhere on the planet currently, and every time I type it in, it either sends me to a different spelling for a Greek name from history or something, or the show, so in the books. So I can't find it, but yeah, Prax.
And apparently too, how it's spelled in the book is also different from how it's spelled on TV as well.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll have to check.
I've only done the audiobook.
Same here. Jefferson Mays. Speaking of, Jefferson Mays narrated most of actually all of them, although the original Cibola Byrne was Eric Davies. But Jefferson Mays is the audiobook narrator, and he's name dropped in this episode. Tycho's station traffic control gives the Jefferson Mays permission to dock at berth 14. I'm just that's just, I spotted that, and that made me smile. What'd you guys?
I'm going to say the first question of the night is if there were any changes for the source material, and what were they, and how they affect how you enjoyed the show.
A to Z. I mean, there was very little straight from the books, if at all. And this episode really felt like they were creating something completely different from the books.
like the way we're introduced to Prax is largely different, like him on the refugee ship. And even though we still got Doris, like it's a completely different kind of type of character than it like she appeared in the books. And then just the overall drummer and Fred and Tycho storyline is largely different as well in this episode.
I didn't recognize much in the books at all. And I don't dislike the changes. I understand most of the changes. I might question some later, but I understand most of the changes. I'm just not a fan of this particular episode. I kept finding myself wanting to fast forward and then realized, oh, I fast forwarded to the end. I guess I have to go back and watch it from the beginning because I didn't really pay attention this time again. And I've made myself watch it, but yeah, I don't like this episode. And it's not because of the changes. How about you, Max?
You know, for me is the biggest thing that kind of like stood out to me was the whole Amos thing. It almost felt like I missed something in last episode, and I had to go back and watch episode 7 to see if I missed something, because it feels like I missed some plot with him. If that makes sense.
Did you find what you missed?
No, I haven't yet watched it yet.
It's the whole thing when in the previous episode when that kid came up and pushed him back because he had pushed the little kid's mom who was going for the, trying when he was like just one apiece, and he pushed her away, and then the little boy comes up shoving him around and freaking out, and that really hit him wrong in the head.
He's like, from that episode to this episode, like I remember that, but it almost seemed like he went on a bender or something, got his ass whooped.
Oh yeah.
Or went through that procedure. That's kind of what, like, off screen. Like, it just seems off.
That would have been hard to get done, I would think.
Yeah, I don't think he went through the procedure. I think it's just he was.
Yeah, it's more that his.
Read
it's like his dead eye looking is going all flat this episode. It's like, did he get that procedure done off screen?
Yeah, I can see why you would think
it's
that.
Just, Yeah, I think it's just really just kind of showing that he's like processing the childhood trauma. Like if you've read the Churn, the novella, like it that kind of lends itself to a little bit of Amos's storyline in this episode.
Yeah, definitely. And we get to see it in a later season, which I know Max has seen later season, and that's from the book. I'm being very vague, so I'm not going to put a spoiler alert up there. He is processing a lot right now. We do see, what it is he's thinking about for a little bit there, but even with that storyline, I think that actually might have been one of the things I liked about this episode was the stuff with Amos. I don't know. It kind of made sense. I don't know if he got into fights. If he did, nobody hit him in the face.
He had a little split lip.
Did he? I missed that.
A little tiny split lip.
Oh wow. Okay, he probably did get into fights then, but I got the impression he's done a lot of debauchery since the last episode.
Well, I mean, in the books, he definitely was. And I'm pretty sure Prax makes a comment about it in the books.
Okay.
Mainly about him being in a chipper attitude.
But that is something too that's later on in the books. Like it wasn't early in book 2. It was something that was much farther in while they were.
Yeah. I actually like Prax. The Prax and Amos stuff in the book is some of my favorite stuff out of Caliban's War. Amos is just must be a great person to have, to hang out with. Maybe, I don't know. Kind of scares me at times, but he really scared me this episode. But yeah, he was really not in a good headspace until shit needed to be done.
Yeah,
and then boom, he was with it.
There's that one scene he has with Alex back on the ship where basically he has Alex just over the railing, and like you can just see him like he like almost ready to just throw him off, and then like he pulls back a little bit, and then he has that line like, "Don't make me fight you," because he was going to fly the ship if
he's going to drive.
Yeah,
and such an Alex response. What happened to you? It's not like what it's out of concern, not like a spite. Most people would say, "What happened to you?" Just like it's real negative towards. No, he sounded concerned. Alex is one of my favorite characters, so especially in the book. Any other changes anybody wanted to bring up that they liked or disliked?
Well, I'll talk about the introduction of Prax here too, because I really liked how
Okay.
they introduced him here in the show. Like, I thought it really worked out well, especially with Chen's just like emotional portrayal of what Prax was going through there, and just kind of like how like expressive he was in this episode, even with just a few lines. Like, you could just see like he is processing so much after the mirrors fell on Ganymede. And so like I thought he really did a great job of just kind of really introducing us to that character and just kind of expressing some of the trauma that he was going through with the loss of his daughter there, and then with the loss of his friend on the ship as well.
He was a brilliant choice on their part casting him, because I know him mostly from Continuum, where he's very not Prax. Prax I don't think would know how to fight his way out of a wet paper bag. But Terry Chen's character on Continuum, I can't even think of the name now, was like a super agent. So it's like I see this, and then I see that's not the same. That's some good acting there, because that's not what I'm used to seeing that guy portray.
Yeah, he has some really good range. Like,
Yeah.
he can do a lot of stuff. Like, I think he's been in one of the Netflix Marvel shows as well. I think it was Jessica Jones. Like, and that was kind of like a different role than
Yep. He was on
Jessica.
I just saw that ad. Remember?
Expanse.
Yeah, it was Jessica Jones. He was just on something. Oh, he was just on The Last of Us, but it was only a one scene role. Kind of wasted on a one scene role, but hey, it's HBO, so HBO can afford to have really good actors in one scene roles.
Speaking of changes, did they kind of merge some of this stuff with Prax being on him and Tycho and the crew going to Ganymede coming back? Like, merge that all into one? Because like they kind of did the "you're fired" speech.
Yeah.
He never left Ganymede. They don't meet him until they get to Ganymede.
Okay.
But here they're using him as their reason to go to Ganymede.
Mm-hmm.
Well, part of their reason to go. He revealed their reason to go to Ganymede.
Yep.
So
It's basically their guide when they're actually on Ganymede. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, guys, I read that part of the book like a month back. I'm like, something's just off here. Like, things were going the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And if I remember right in the books too, like, it was Prax that actually approached Holden to get help to find his daughter. Like, it wasn't Holden and Naomi that like were looking for him. Like, he saw Holden and thought like, okay, this is my best chance of actually trying to help save my daughter.
The one person who's not a spy who recognized Holden on Ganymede was Prax. Because everybody else who wasn't a spy that saw him on Ganymede was fooled by whatever happened to his face, that beard, I guess.
Yeah.
I love that line, what happened to his face? I think that's Avasarala. Which I gotta say, I've said it once before, anybody who wants to read the series, listen to the audiobooks by Jefferson Mays. His Avasarala is just, it should have won every award every year that those books came out, those audiobooks came out, because he's just amazing. And his Avasarala is damn near as good as Shorei's.
Well, we're ready for the second question. It's how well did the show adapt the scenery, costumes, props, music, CGI, etc.? For me, I'd have to just pipe in right now and just say the spacing scene. Like, it was great but tragic, and I think they did a pretty good job of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the favorite scenes of that episode, even though it's tragic and very sad. Like, they did it so well, especially just with like the portrayal of Zero G and just kind of like how it all worked.
Yeah, they don't fail ever really when it comes to production side, especially they've been pretty good with the low G, well, the zero G, and the lower G, well, they not so good. I mean, look at Ganymede. She should have been bouncing halfway to the ceiling the way she ran towards that window at the beginning. Talking about May, because that's what 1/7 of Earth's gravity, so it's like it's less than what they even had on the moon. And you remember how everybody knows how much they're bouncing around with all that weight on them. So it's like, yeah, I mean, you can't really get around 1G of gravity on Earth to do lower gravity, but everything else they do fine, great with with the zero G especially.
That was kind of a nice callback scene too to an earlier episode where you had Bobby and her platoon kind of out patrolling, and then they kind of look at one of the domes and they see like this little girl kind of jumping up and down. I think that was
my goodness, that just clicked. That never clicked for me. I didn't even think of that. Thank you, Shawn. Oh wow.
No worries.
Now I know. I see. I didn't think anything of it watching her wave, and I remember thinking a couple of times, "What's the point of the person back there waving? Who are they waving at?" Wow, I'm a stupid sometimes, but
it's a nice time step as well to kind of tell us where are we in this story.
Yeah. From a technical side point, I like that they made it zero G before venting, because it gave it just that bit more of a realistic of venting like that doesn't just shoot people out like you see in a lot of sci-fi.
Yeah.
But throwing them in zero G, that would definitely suck you out.
Well, it's not the air leaving. The air was already gone before they started moving out. If you go back and rewatch the spacing, once the camera goes to the outside, you'll see that the maneuvering
the ship's moving too.
It was shifted sideways. And it didn't really have to do much to shift sideways, just a couple meters, before firing up. But those maneuvering thrusters are enough to do it.
Mm-hmm. The other part, Amos on a spacewalk.
Yes.
There was a part where he took a step and he was trying to get his other foot on, and you see his foot just like slide as he's turning, to kind of give you an idea of like how much rotation's on this thing.
Yeah.
I thought that was really well done, because like it kind of showed him too, like in order to stay on, like he had to put his hands down on the metal's outer surface just in order to bear crawl to like the oxygen shut off. Like I think they really did a really good job of just showing like on like a space station like that, like how much like spin, how like the outer spin just kind of really kind of it's looking just to throw you off. Like it's not really there to give you purchase.
Right.
If anything, I say he should have been on the other side of where he cut that plate, so it doesn't fall into you.
Oh, the piece that flew off. He didn't need to say that. They didn't know. This is Tycho.
No, I said he should have been on the other side of it, so it flies off away from you instead of towards you.
Oh,
it's like with knives. You cut away from you, not towards you.
Yeah. Okay. It was moving. It did move away from him though when it fell off.
It went like up and over kind of thing.
I'll have to go back and look at that.
Yeah, it was kind of like Amos was like here, so like the thing just kind of went like that. Like it almost just like hit him as it was coming up.
I think he was behind it as it flew away.
Given off to the station
was turning like this. The station was turning like that, so that means it would have gone this way, because it would stay here. So its effective was going in the opposite direction. It was going the direction his head was pointing. That's why the sparks were going that way. If you watch, the sparks came and went over the camera. I'm pretty sure that's what you'll see if you go back and look at it. But yeah, all the choreography and then the actual performance of that from the moment he comes out and has to flip and everything, and then he's trying to walk and his legs go way up in the air and he's being pulled away. He's trying to bring it back because gravity's harder on you out there than it is on the inside. You know, it's at its strongest on the outside. Well, gravity. So, yeah, I don't have any complaints about production. Never complaints about production on this show.
You know, if anything, Naomi's going to be complaining about Prax's haircut being the same as hers.
A lot of belters have that haircut.
But I gotta give props to like the makeup department too for like that scar and like the staples like on Prax's head, because that just it looked painful.
He was probably out cold for it, but anything else on production?
I think that covers a lot of it.
Yeah.
The next question would be is how well written was the dialogue, and how did those actors deliver those lines? Like, were they delivered well, horribly, etc.?
Shawn?
Yeah, I really liked Dawes' speech at the beginning there. I thought that was a really well written, and then Harris did an excellent job just executing that speech, because as you can see, like, it had a very big impact on some of the Belters, the Black Sky faction there on Tycho. And so like it really kind of set up the episode, and just kind of, I think for Naomi too, just trying to figure out, okay, whose side is she on? Is she going to be on Fred's side, or she's going to support Dawes in this effort? And so I think that kind of played into a little bit of what she was going through this episode as well. And so I think that speech just did a really good job of just setting up this episode.
Yeah. Speech made me angry, but it was a really well-written speech. I think that's part of why it made me angry, is because it was well-written and brilliantly performed, as always.
Oh, yeah.
Jared Harris is like the biggest casting, in my opinion, that this show got. It just, even if just for a minor character or a recurring character, it was just like, that's a coup getting him for this show. Especially Sci-Fi Channel getting him for this show. And I wouldn't have known about this show if it hadn't been for Chad Coleman quitting The Walking Dead to come work on this show as Fred Johnson. And I'm like, oh, really? Okay, I'm going to have to check that show out, because I hadn't heard of it. So, and I'm really happy he did, because I love his Fred Johnson. I really love Fred Johnson.
Yeah, we got some interesting things with him this episode too, just with kind of some of his history with Drummer. And I think that was something that they helped to really kind of establish is why Drummer is here and why she stands besides Fred. And I just really love Drummer as well. So I think this was a great episode for her. And so like I love to see kind of
Fred made a stupid choice he made a stupid choice this episode, though. And that was telling them to put the Dawes up on the big screen so everybody could see it. Kamina tried saying in your office, and he's like, nope, not gonna do it. Gonna watch it right here so everybody can see what he has to say when he chews me out.
Yeah, that
came smart like
back
that.
To bite him.
I'm like, that led to people being killed, at least 4 people being killed. You know?
Yeah, and
so
I never really liked the Fred basically telling Holden like he's not welcome back here part. It felt a little out of place for what Fred, because
even with
they had the same interests.
Yeah. And even with that argument where they had earlier in the episode, you know, that wasn't enough hostility generated then to overcome just saving their life for Fred to be deciding to be a dick about letting the Rossi leave. That's one of my big complaints about the episode, is that doesn't make sense. Unless there's stuff on the cutting room floor that we didn't get to see, it doesn't make sense. And it was a bad decision, I think.
You know, from the book side, they had like a whole contract with them. Like they were working hand in hand, and we kind of lost that in the TV show.
Yeah.
And even in the book, it felt like a fake firing. It felt more like a plausible deniability. of just letting them go off and do what needs to get done without him actually directly being involved. And I kind of get that same sense in the show.
Okay. Maybe. I mean, I've considered whether that was all BS, but if it was all for show, but
we also have that
don't know.
whole 2 episodes ago where Holden interjected in that meeting, and
yeah.
he was like, you really didn't need to get involved in that. You just made their point for them.
Well, that was Naomi who said that.
I thought Fred was involved too, but either way, it was like,
well, Fred was involved in the conversation with the OPA, but it was Naomi saying to Jim later, you know what they saw in there? They saw 2 inners, saying what the Belters should do. So, I just really fundamentally disagree with Fred's hostility suddenly towards Jim, and Jim deciding to be, a little bit of a brat about it. It was a little unnecessary on both parts.
And like I can understand like Fred not being happy that Holden wouldn't consent to like bringing him a sample of the protomolecule, but like you should know by now that Fred should know by now that Holden just wasn't going to help spread that stuff around any farther. Like Fred should have known that like Holden was going to do anything he could just to wipe that stuff out from existence.
Remember if I'm wrong or not? Did he have it in the books, a sample, Fred?
In the books, Fred was given their sample as their cost for doing what they wanted back in Leviathan Wakes. When they wanted Fred to take the missiles for a detour, Fred said, "Hell no!" And he says, "You want my sample? That's the cost." So Fred already has a sample at this point in the book, which is another decision that they used it to give something between Naomi and Jim. With the whole thing of Naomi not trusting Jim, with the fact that she's getting ready to give it to whoever. All those scenes. Without withholding the protomolecule from Fred, they wouldn't be able to do all those scenes, and they wanted to add that tension, which understandable, because there's totally different types of tension in the book than what we get in the show. So, and that just makes sense because TV is not books.
Well, I always did say, even from season 1, that they really liked amping up the drama and tension in the TV show compared to the book.
Yes, they do. And they have right from the get-go. From the very pilot episode.
That's going to have, long-term ramifications, kind of like this, where we've already changed several things to ramp up the drama or tension, or what do you want to call it? Does anyone have anything else to comment on that, or who ready for the next question?
I'm good. Next best scene?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Next question is scene or sequence you most remembered, enjoyed, or hated?
And you can have one for each if you want. Because I do. I'm just going to get it out of the way. I hate the hostage crisis scenario scene. I just did not like it, not only as a storyline sequence, but it just, I don't know, it just didn't work for me, and I just really hate it story-wise. So
yeah, my favorite part about that scene though is just Drummer in the end. Like she just gets her revenge at the end there, and that kind of just sets up Drummer to the rest of the series as well. Like basically, don't make her angry, or you're going to be on the facing the barrel end of a gun from Drummer. Yeah. But like I think that really helps set up Drummer, because like Drummer is basically a new character for the TV show at this point. Like she's not in the books for a while yet, and so like
well, right here she's really kind of partially. She's Michio Pa, is what she is. She takes a lot of Michio. Well, pretty much everything Michio does that they adapt into the show.
And well, Michio's a book 3 character, if I remember right, too. Like this is kind of. She
is referenced in Caliban's War, I think, if not seen. I am pretty sure. I would have to look,
Okay.
but I know we see her earlier than the story of season 3 or book 3.
I'll take your word on it.
Yeah, same.
Max, do you have a scene you most want to bring up?
Scene wise, between Dawes' little speech and probably, I think who it was, Vamos stuff, pretty much.
Yeah.
Prax's scene was also up there in the top of the episode.
The scene I remember the most from the first time I saw it was the spacing of the inners.
Yeah.
That's just kind of an unmemorable, unforgettable scene,
Mhm.
To watch, especially on Sci-Fi Channel. It looked so good and it was done, just done so well, and it was just so painful at the same time.
Yes,
But the
same.
scene I enjoyed is I meant we were talking about earlier. It's the whole sequence, Amos going out to cut the O2, cut the oxygen. I just love that. It was some really good. I mean, and it's also right there, actually more of a stunt performance scene than the rest of the episode. Just like the other scene I like with the spacing. That wasn't dialogue. That was stunt performance there.
Do you think his character is hungover while doing that?
Oh, sure.
Maybe.
But I think they might also have like some kind of sobering up pills that you could take down the med bay. I think if that's a technology they have, that's something you're definitely going to find on a ship that's transporting a bunch of Marines.
Like, that unlocked a memory for me in that I believe a little later in the book, someone gets injured and they let's just pump him full of methamphetamines, and he hits a bunch and he perks right up.
Yep. That was with Bobby a little bit ago.
Well, Amos specifically in the book, I believe, went KO'd for a bit.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, I've actually seen that done to somebody once. And it's just, wow, the change. But craziest things you see in your 20s. Those are the 3 episodes or scenes I had that I wanted to bring up.
There was a scene. Yeah, there was one scene when Naomi was on the ship and she was kind of working with the missile and the console. It took me a while to figure out what was actually happening, because at first I thought she was sending the missile to Ceres, to Dawes, but it looks like she was just kind of mapping out, okay, what ships are in the area and things like that. But that took, when I first thought, why is she sending this missile to Ceres? That took me out of it, because it just didn't make sense for what Naomi was doing. And it took a few watches to actually figure out what was happening, because there's no dialogue. It's kind of hard to make out everything on the scene because it's just so busy. So it's just one of those things where you just kind of have to really kind of slow it down and watch it a few times to actually get what's happening.
That's just the protomolecule missile, right?
Yeah, the proto missile, yeah.
As much as she's playing with that missile, I'm surprised she hasn't renamed it Steely Dan. No, but
the only other scene that comes to mind for me too is this is the episode 2 where basically Holden says "I love you" to Naomi, and then they have their no more secrets talks, even though she doesn't. She still has her secret, yeah.
Yeah. Move on to actors, or did you have something else?
No. The next question is best or worst actor for this episode, and or casting, if that's an issue in this episode.
Terry Chen as Dr. Praxidiki Ming. We talked about him earlier. The guy just showed to me that he's got, the range that we discussed to an extent that I had never, expected from him, and I just, he's going to continue being brilliant the rest of this season and, the entire time he's on the show. But Terry Chen is Prax, and Wes Chatham is always. Well, not always.
I'm really excited. Yeah, I really love the stuff between Amos and Prax here coming up in the rest of the season and in season 3. Like it's probably one of my favorite storylines
Yeah.
in this, just because it feels such like a very like real relationship that they form. I know it's a bit of spoilers, but it just worked really well, especially on TV here.
I will say that Amos getting extra cold this episode really sets in with his relationship with Prax later, particularly dealing with like his daughter and other stuff that happens with that.
Yeah.
And this is probably just my headcanon too, but I think like the relationship that Amos develops with Prax really kind of helps to lead him onto his storyline in book 5 and season 5 as well. Because I think like just seeing Prax and his family, it just kind of inspires him to actually really kind of try to reconnect with his own.
Yeah. That definitely. He needs to reconnect, but don't want to talk about how that goes down.
Yeah.
That's for
later on.
You know, I have to give props to Grace Ling Kung, I think her name is, who played Doris.
Yeah. She was good.
She did a great job there.
Did you guys pick up on it that she was interested in a bit of a relationship with him, or is that just me?
I mean, could see it, yeah.
Her body language with him, especially at that point where she puts his hand on his and he like pulls his hand away, like he was uncomfortable about it, but she seemed like she was interested in more than just colleagues with Prax. And I think he wasn't ready.
It definitely came across like that a little bit too.
And I don't think he was ready.
And I'll say this too. I think one of the changes that the show made from the books to that works really well is they got rid of like the ex-wife storyline as well. Like I really didn't care for that in the books. And so I think just as a way to streamline Prax's storyline in the show, I think that getting rid of that just worked out too.
Definitely. That was a bit of a drag in the book for me as well.
I know it's been a while since I've seen the series, so I don't recall if we get that scene in a series, the TV show. With the ex-wife callback?
I think they got rid of the ex-wife altogether in the show. I don't think they even mention May's mom in the show or perhaps having an ex-wife.
Yeah, I couldn't recall if they ever brought that back up in the show. It's been a while, particularly when, like in the book where Prax is appealing to the belt and he gets all the donations in, and then the ex-wife calls and says, no, he's horrible. Like, I can't remember if that part was in there or not.
No, I don't think
it's been
that's
a while
on the
since I've seen the
show.
series.
No, I don't think there's even that appeal in the show either. I don't think Prax makes out like that system-wide appeal for like help me find my daughter type stuff either.
I'd almost forgotten about that. Yeah, I don't think it's not in the show at least. I'm pretty sure.
I said it's been a while for me. Kira G as drummer, I thought did fantastic this episode. And she really cemented herself in as someone who's potentially more of a hard ass and badass than Fred.
Yeah, she is definitely more of a badass than Fred.
I mean, Fred clearly struggles over spacing someone, and she's like, yeah, this is not a problem for me.
Yeah. Fred's not the violent one himself. He's the kind who says, you go be violent over there. You know, so whereas drummer, she's definitely got no problem against being violent. You know. I'm not saying that Fred never got violent. You know, we know for a fact he did. He said he killed people with his own hands. So,
but I gotta say too, like just kind of seeing, especially after drummer got shot too, just kind of like the care that Fred had for her, because you could just see that they have a very close relationship. They trust each other very much, and so I think that was portrayed very well during that hostage situation type scene as well.
Yeah, that did come through very strongly.
Were there any other actors that stood out this episode?
No. Oh, what we got here?
Yeah, this is Dare.
He or she was definitely not in that episode.
No. don't think they've been out to up to Canada, unless your cat has been to
Nope.
Canada. Okay.
Nope, he has been in the United States only.
And I don't feel like Drummer's a cat person.
Definitely not, I don't think.
No, I don't imagine her being an animal person at all. Not at all. Watch, then we get an episode and she's got gerbils. So, gerbils and a parakeet.
All right, our next question of the night, or final question of the night, is: of the themes present in this episode, which ones caught your attention? What did you think about those themes? Are they relevant to the books or even happening in real life?
I'll let you guys go first.
Shawn, want to go?
So one of the themes I noticed too was just kind of like the plight of refugees, like especially just with Prax and Doris and the other Ganymede refugees on the ship. Like you could just see like the poor treatment that they receive, and that's kind of what mirrors real life too, where like refugees are just like treated like second-class citizens. They're not really even given simple rights. Like even when Prax is trying to dock with that doctor, like, hey, this happened, we need to tell someone, we need to report it. Like it's kind of on the bottom of the list of actually things that they're caring about. So I think that's kind of one of the episodes or one of the themes that we see in this episode.
That actually kind of ties into what I was thinking of, is the inhumanity of humanity, or the humanity of inhumanity, or however you want to put it. Just how everyone treats others around them, and how easily they just transform people into being inhuman enough that they can just space them like nothing. And they only treat their version of themselves, like the Belters as human. Inners are not human, so they can just go in space.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we get with that horrible spacing. But luckily we don't have just those types of attitudes we're seeing, because we do get the counterpoint to that with somebody like Alex, who's going out of his way to help people, and he's even trying to get Amos to help people. I mean, the last few weeks, last couple of weeks since, the shit hit the fan in Ganymede, I've asked, what do we think is who do we think it was whose idea was to go down for the Rossi crew to go help give out supplies for the refugees showing up, and figured it had to be either Naomi or Alex. And I think this episode kind of shows to me that it was Alex. Yeah.
If you remember though, what did Amos say regarding Alex?
Why don't you go
about his wife and child? Yeah.
He's trying to do something good to make up for the fact that he's not taking care of his family either.
Does the motivation, I mean, the real reason, maybe the underlying cause for why he's doing it really matter?
Maybe.
I don't think so.
I think it might just be a cheap shot by Amos as well, because I think just Alex is just trying to do something to help at this point too. Like he's either handing out supplies, or he's trying to fix up like those walkie-talkies or their like future cell phones. Yeah.
It kind of goes to the nature of altruism, and how much of it actually is altruism versus just making yourself feel better about the things you've done. Like there's that whole aspect to that Alex and Amos side there.
I mean, it doesn't matter why you're doing it. If you do something good for people, you're probably going to feel good about it. Whether, you went into it to feel good about yourself or not, it's something that's a side effect that's going to happen no matter what, or at least it should happen no matter what. So I don't think we should really focus too much on whether or not that's the reason they're doing it. I think the fact that somebody's doing good is the important factor here, and that that's what Alex is doing. And my whole point was, I think that's where they got their idea to do it the previous two times we've seen them, or the previous time we've seen them, working and with refugees and But any other themes from you, Shawn?
I think another one that we saw too is just kind of like the impact of the past. Like we saw it with kind of Naomi, we saw it with Amos, and just kind of getting some initial groundwork for his storyline. And then we saw it with Fred and Drummer, is just kind of like the impact that the past has had on just kind of where they are and where they're going. Because like we got I think this is like the first mention we have, or maybe the second mention we have with Naomi and talking about a possible child. And so I think, so it's kind of like setting up, okay, like the impact these characters past has had on them and just kind of their outlook on the world.
Yeah, definitely. And I do think it's the second time, and she's lied both times.
Yeah.
Because that goes into what I was going to bring up. But I'll let Max go.
I mentioned mine earlier.
Okay. I had two that really stuck out. I mean, they're actually both kind of like a double coin, a coin. First, we got loyalty versus betrayal. And you get that line. It was brought up, Fred Drummer relationship. There's a lot of trust there, which is the other one I have with trust and distrust. But, the Fred and Drummer relationship it seems to be a very strong one that goes back a ways. I don't know how long ago Anderson Station took place. I think they might have told us in season 1, but I don't remember. You got on the loyalty side, you got Diego now loyal to a new OPA boss. Instead of working for Fred, he's now working for Dawes, which that's his hometown hero after all. So he's probably really happy about that. But it meant that he had to betray Kamina and betray Fred. You got Stars and friends loyal to Diogo, as we saw when Diogo was being taken off. Stars and the traffic guy betraying Fred and Drummer. I don't remember Eden or Eden, Edin. They don't ever say his name on screen in the show, but when I looked him up on IMDb, it was Eden, who's the traffic control guy. God, I cannot read I don't know what I wrote here. Dawes betraying Fred and Drummer. Doris's loyalty, or maybe more than just loyalty, but her loyalty to Prax, getting him off Ganymede and into that ship, the refugee ship. Maybe in the long run it was the wrong thing for him, but and then Naomi's betrayal or hiding of that sample from Holden really stuck out. And then everything there that I talked about with loyalty and betrayal, pretty much all those same relationships are the trust and distrust. So it was basically two ways of looking at two different things. Because Holden trusts Naomi, but she's not trusting him. And I can understand why she's not trusting him, but there it is.
I think too, like another interesting thing about this episode too, we started to see some of the Millerization of Holden as well. It's kind of like him, especially just following up with the last episode, like him just kind of more reacting on instinct rather than like thinking things through, even though Holden really never thinks things through. But like, I think it's just like
that's putting it nicely.
But like him just kind of resorting first to shooting, like that's very much a Miller type of thing to do. And so I think that kind of puts a wrench in between Holden and Naomi's relationship as well.
There was another Miller instance from a couple weeks ago, wasn't there, Max, that I brought up?
I can't recall.
Holden behaving like Miller. But Caliban's War has a lot of Holden turning into Miller. A lot of it's not even going to be stuff that they're going to include in the show, but he's definitely, especially with the whole year of hunting pirates, and not only did it turn him into Miller, it turned him into the exact type of sailor that he refused to be when he flew for the UN, the UNN, because he got kicked out for throwing a punch. But he threw the punch because he was being berated for having refused to fire on a ship that was flying without its transponder, and the captain was ordering it to reveal itself. to identify itself and to heal too. And he refused to fire. So they're just smuggling. If they're smuggling anything, it's probably just refugees. And sure enough, turned out it was just refugees.
You need a leg
I'll be
bone?
honest, I wasn't really that thrilled with this episode, and I just overall, I'd much rather watch just about any other episode of this season. I think this is my least favorite episode of the entire season, of the show. So
There's a lot of setup in this episode too, and I think that's kind of where things get a little bogged down as they're trying to introduce Prax. They're trying to introduce kind of the next steps for the Rossi crew when it comes to just tracking down the protomolecule on Ganymede and things like that. So it's just there's a lot of setup in this episode just to try to get to where they need to go next. And so it's just I think this episode has a lot in it. Like it's just there's
it does
so many different story points and story arcs they're trying to just touch on in one episode. So it just kind of gets a little heavy at the end there.
Yeah, see, I didn't mind that. I like that didn't drag like some episodes in the past have.
I think I would have liked this episode too. I think I would have liked this episode if it wasn't for the whole, command and control center being taken over to steal the nukes, to launch the nukes. I think that kind of killed the episode for me. But there is a lot of other good stuff. Like I'm just looking at one of my notes here. Fred said, "We could steal another ship to throw at it. Look where that got us." And he's saying that to Jim like it's the Rossi's fault that they stole a ship to throw at Eros. They were the ones who tried to convince him not to take the Naboo. What else did I have notes for?
Speaking of Naboo, did we ever find out if they brought that back to Tycho in book or show?
That's in season 3, I believe.
Yeah, season 3.
Okay. In the books, did they bring it back, or they just kind of like,
book 3.
I lost it?
Book 3.
Okay.
It's in book 3. Does it have it? No, it's still the Naboo. So, all right. The one little thing that was weird is that Belter ship, crewman comes around throwing out water bottles and rations to everybody before they space a bunch of people. That doesn't make sense. You space the people, then you divvy out the rations you've got. You don't divvy out when you've got a larger population, you divvy out when you've got a small population. How many rations did he just give to people who went out the door? I got to wonder about that.
If anything, I would say that if you notice just prior to that, people are already starting to fight over stuff.
Just after
you're trying to get people to calm.
It was after that. They were the very first thing we saw him do was giving out rations.
Yeah, but they were, that's what we saw.
I think that's a way to. Well, I think that's a way to establish that this captain or person on the ship identifies Prax as a Belter, not a Martian or an Earther. That interaction, I think, kind of is used as a way just to establish that Prax comes for the belt, and that's how this crew member basically later on, when he's facing all the Martians and Inners and Earthers, knows that Prax is not one of them. Right. So he's one of the belts. So that's, I think, kind of why they have that there to set that up.
Prax started talking to him at first, asking for his daughter in perfectly good English, no accent English, which they point out in the book he learns, no accent Chinese and English. And then the guy's like, huh? And he has to translate into Belter Patois. It was me daughter, not daughter. Not my daughter, it was me daughter. And and the accent he gave in that one line was enough to tell the Belter, here's another Belter.
Mm-hmm.
Although he's not really from the belt. He's from Ganymede. That's not near the belt. But that's a side point. I don't have any other notes, stuff to bring up, funny or otherwise. So Thank you, Shawn, for coming on. It was fun
Yeah,
talking
thanks for
with
having
you.
me.
We'll have to try to get you on again for season 3 if you're up to it. I'm sure you'll
definitely.
be able to. Maybe
I'm
even for
always
Wheel of Time.
game to
we'll
talk about
see
the
what-
Expanse.
Yeah, we've got Wheel of Time come up eventually this year, so might even be able to get you in on that.
Yeah, sweet.
So thank you for coming on, joining me on this, Max, as always. Thank you guys at home for watching. Please come back next week as we discuss watching
Episode 9, The Weeping Somnambulist.
I'm
Yes,
not going to try to
exactly.
say it either. So see you guys next week. Don't forget to be awesome.